Welcome to the Kings Beat podcast. I am James Ham, Kings Insider for ESPN 1320 and the Kings Beat. Joining me, Fox 40, Sean Cunningham. Sean, how are you?
I am very well, James. Wrapping up what it will be my last vacation before the start of training camp, which starts in mere moments, mere days. Down in San Diego for a few days, acting like a complete ratchet and having the time of my life. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Live it up,
How are you?
Sean.
Yes, sir.
I'm good. The last time we spoke, I was heading to Alaska on a cruise. And then I got back from the cruise and had to go instantly into work mode with the insiders all week. And so it's been a little like all over the board. We threw this together at the last minute, so that's why there is no Brendan. We have not heard from Brendan, and we hope that like it's possible he could show up magically, and we're like, hey, there's Brendan. But we had to throw this thing together like very quickly because Sean is in San Diego and I have an event tonight that I've got to go to. So, but yeah, Sean, Alaska, amazing. Like the sights, the sounds, everything was pretty spectacular. I posted a lot of pictures, which I don't usually do, on the gram. But it was intriguing. I've never done a cruise. I might do a cruise again, but I'm not sure. It'll probably be a while. And now I understand why people like are super old on cruises because it's like if you want to keep traveling, it gives you another avenue to keep traveling once you get to an age where it's difficult to like get on planes and take trains and move from one city to the next and all that stuff. So Sean, we first of all, let's just take care of the business stuff. If you're watching here on YouTube and you don't mind, subscribe to the channel and give us a thumbs up. That helps the algorithm, of course. That would be cool. Let's see. Number 2, we had Off the Record with the Kings Beat virtual happy hour part 15, the tandem with Deuce and Mo on
Nice.
Thursday. Yeah, Sean wasn't able to make it. Brendan was able to make it. But it was a tremendous success. The happy hours are incredible. I love them. They're so much fun. Deuce and Mo were incredible, and we had a good time talking about all kinds of craziness and sort of their path and like all of our paths and how this world of podcasting and what we do here, it's just like a really wide open world that there's room for everybody. And I thought it was spectacular to have them on there. A good guest to kick off the training camp and training camp. I mean, and media day type season because they're both like they're so positive. They got a good spirit about them.
Yeah, that's a tough one to miss. I wish I had been able to hop on that one. I was absent because of a second concert in consecutive days. I went and saw Coldplay on Wednesday with her. Her opened the Vallejo, Vallejo's own. Her opened up for Coldplay on at Snapdragon Stadium. And then on Thursday, which was the day of the happy hour, my first time seeing Odessa, which is kind of more like an EDM, which isn't totally like my thing, but what an experience. They're headlining festivals all over the world, and it was quite the experience. So I really enjoyed
Really?
that. So yeah,
Okay.
a lot of fun.
I've been working with Kyle the last couple of weeks, and Kyle is like got me listening. Well, I'm not listening yet, but he's used our rejoiner music. He started to
Uh-huh.
do like a bunch of K-pop,
All
and
right.
it's
Yeah.
it's really cool. Like
Into
I'm
BTS and all that, or a little
yeah,
bit further
yeah.
down.
No, the BTS, and then something cats.
Yeah.
Like I don't know, like whatever it is, like it's really cool. I'm down. I probably need to find a way to listen to more of it because it's just really lots of energy and lots of cool vibes like going into our rejoiners. I'm
Nice.
always
Yeah.
open to listen to new stuff.
I know that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't think I'll ever go to country stuff, but outside of that, I'm pretty wide open.
Hey man,
Um,
I'm really into Zach Bryan right now. Yeah, he's pretty impressive. That's a fun. He's got a great voice, and I am especially if country steers more poppy. I'm definitely into it. But
Okay. All
yeah, check
right.
out Zach Bryan. I think you might like him.
Okay. Um, let's get to basketball. We do have a bunch of
Let's.
stuff to like cover. I'll start with this. There's a report this morning that from Keith Smith, which is totally a reliable guy, um, that the Sacramento Kings have signed James Akinjo.
Mhm.
But like that's I don't even think that's going to be like a training camp deal. That's going to be like one of those things I believe where you sign somebody to waive them and then give them some money and potentially have them show up in your G League camp. Maybe I'm wrong there, but and we had heard his name before, right?
Yep.
But that's definitely something that appears to have happened. It's not on the NBA's list of transactions, and it's also not something I've been able to confirm myself. But it kind of goes with this trend that the Kings have been filling out their training camp roster, building up to Monday's media day, and so I've Frankie Cardicelli over our friend Frankie broke that the Kings had signed Chance Comanche.
Mhm.
We hadn't gotten to that yet because I was in Alaska. And then our friend Brendan Nunez broke the news that Deontay Burton had signed with the Kings or is going to sign with the Kings. Neither of these have shown up on the transaction list. So I'm gonna just like there's an order to things and a reason why they haven't released their full roster yet because they're doing things like probably like the James Akinjo move. But then, Sean, I was able to find out yesterday that Jeremy Lamb and Jaylen Noel are both had both been are about to be signed and brought into camp for Monday. And let's start there. Well, I guess let's start with Chance and Deontay. I mean, these guys, they're both they feel like they're G League additions. They both played for the Stockton Kings last year. Do you have any insight on these guys or things to add to that?
Not really. I mean, if they're familiar faces like you mentioned with Stockton, and even the Akinjo deal. I mean, his rights were traded to Stockton from, I believe it was Westchester, if I'm not mistaken. I could be mistaken there, but he's a guy who's
Oh,
toiled in the
that's
G League
right.
as well. So I
Yeah.
think when you think of those three guys, it's like you certainly you will identify some players within the Stockton organization and help not only find them a little bit more cash, elevate them a little bit, and get them some experience in the early goings of training camp. Certainly, and I think having those guys around the NBA roster, especially if they're going to be featured players on your G League squad, is a positive thing. Get some of the at least the taste of what the NBA is like and what the NBA club will have going forward. Kind of the teachings and wisdoms of the coaching staff, and then that will now carry over into what comes of the season. And try to keep as much continuity as possible, or if there can be any continuity, obviously, of playing fast and certain principles on the offensive end and defensive end and things they're trying to implement. So, yeah, these are all moves for really for Stockton, and except for with the case of what you reported yesterday with some guys that have a little bit more NBA experience, like Jeremy Lamb, second stint with the Kings, and then obviously Jaylen Newell, who has a lot of offensive pop to his game, coming from Minnesota. It's kind of interesting. I just spent here in San Diego the first couple days with a good buddy of mine who I worked with at Channel 10 back in the day, and KHTK, Pierre Nugent, and he covers the Timberwolves out in Minneapolis, and was curious. He's wondering why he hadn't seen news of what anyone signing Jaylen Newell and when what was going on there, because he's a guy who's been able to impress some people with his offensive game, and uh, obviously didn't have a ton of opportunity, but here he is in Sacramento, and it's an interesting kind of fit as he looks to battle for a roster spot, but that might be a guy who, even if it doesn't happen here in Sacramento, and I would predict that it doesn't, what interest he might have once training camp and preseason kind of draws to a close.
Yeah, when it comes to Newell, This is a 24-year-old guy who averaged 10.8 points per game last season. Like he played in 65 games from Minnesota Timberwolves, and he's been part of the rotation for the last 3 years. He is a solid offensive player, and
Right.
I think he really struggled last season with his 3-point shot, but that seemed like an anomaly. Like he shot 39.4% the year before, and then last year dipped all the way down to 28.9%. But Sean, I was kind of thinking, okay, is this a potential 3-and-D guy? Right. And I went to his defensive metrics, and the answer is no.
No, he is
Like
not.
that. No, no. He allowed on average, his opponent to shoot 7.7% higher than their their standard average from the field last season. And he was okay from 15 feet out. I think it was 2% higher from 15 feet out and 0.5% higher from the 3-point line. But that doesn't bode well for him allowing players to get by him. So someone had mentioned this on Twitter. I don't remember who it was, but that his game is very similar to Terrence Davis. And I look at both players in sort of the same tree. Like they are very athletic. They don't mind putting someone on a poster. They have some pop to their game. They're physical players, but at the end of the day, they need to figure out how to play defense in order to consistently get minutes, especially on a team like the Kings. So, um, we've seen Jeremy Lamb. Of course, Jeremy Lamb came over in the trade for Domantas Sabonis. Okay, so I do have this confirmed now on background. I can, just
Right.
basically tell you that the Sacramento Kings did sign and waive James Akinjo yesterday. So he is now basically, I'm sure they gave him a little bit of a pop there, a little bit of money to keep him around. They recently traded for G League rights, and this was a move for Stockton. And so yeah, it's a way for them to give him a little bit of extra money. So that's taken care of. Now the Jeremy Lamb situation. Again, he came over with Sabonis and Justin Holiday in the Tyrese Halliburton trade with Buddy Hield, and I thought he looked good, Sean. We've seen Jeremy Lamb from afar in the past, but if was it just me? Or he seemed to have a lot more game than I remember.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed Jeremy Lamb with the Kings. I thought he was very impactful. I thought he really impacted some of the defensive things they were trying to do in team concepts. I liked him a lot. There were, I think, some up and down things there. I think he had kind of a lot going on also from a fit
I
standpoint.
Yeah, I
What's
think he had some personal stuff going on too.
Yeah, but then he didn't play last year, right?
No, he didn't play at all last year. He didn't
Yeah,
find his way onto an NBA roster, and I don't know if that's because he was kind of, like I, I don't know if he needed a year off to heal up and like to get ready, or if he just wasn't someone that other teams were looking at. I was kind of surprised he wasn't in the league because he's super smooth. Like he looks like a high end ball player, and he's a guy who's
Ye-
averaged 15 points a game in a season and 10 points for his career.
yeah. Him not being on a roster last year was very surprising, and hopefully that had more to do with maybe just the adjustment. I mean, coming off of a trade, he's kind of bounced around a little bit. I don't know. I wouldn't, I wouldn't bet that either one of these guys finds a way onto the roster. It'd be kind of a cool story if that was to happen. But you can kind of see what they're looking at with bringing in two guys in kind of a two guard situation. Neither one of them, in my opinion, handle the ball that well. But would certainly find a path onto the team. And everyone looks at that third guard situation, the third point guard, and saying, "Oh, you don't have anybody." And I think the Kings would push back that they do with having so many ball handlers on the roster and people that they trust to be able to make plays. So whether that be Domas, Malik, Kevin Herter, even Chris Duarte.
Yeah.
So I don't think that the Kings would agree with a lot of the fans in saying, "Hey, we have a hole here." And if anywhere, finding defense would be kind of a nice little addition, if you will. But that doesn't happen with Jeremy Noel, or excuse me, with Jaylen Noel. So to do that with maybe Jeremy Lamb and somebody who has a little bit more experience under his belt, certainly he's been a veteran in this league and has played with some of these guys. And has a familiarity that he could give him a kind of a leg up on some competition there, but I don't know that I would bet on it, James.
Yeah, I'm gonna say the same thing, Sean. Like, it's gonna be difficult for either one of these guys to make the final roster. I think the Kings, like, if I were a betting man, I would say there's a better chance of them going into the season with a 14-man roster than them going into the season with a full 15. It's possible that maybe Noel or Lamb like stand out, and you're like, hey, let's keep them around at least temporarily. I can only imagine that both of these are like very low guaranteed contracts going into camp, and so you'd have until January. I think it's January 9th or January 10th to decide if you want to keep them or not. But if you need the body, that's one thing. But I kind of look at both of these guys kind of like in the same vein that like PJ Dozier, right, last season, and like whether he's going to be on the roster or not, you kind of figured he wasn't. But you never know. I think the Kings are open to like if somebody jumps out at you and looks way better. The one guy I would say is that Jaylen Noel. The fact that he's 24 and then
Right.
he played in 65 games and averaged 19 minutes a game, and he's been in the rotation of the Timberwolves the last couple of years. That at least gives you some intrigue. He is a player who's stuck in the league, and the fact that he was available right now is kind of a strange thing. Like there's a reason, and I mean it's the same thing out there. Everyone wants to know why Terrence Davis isn't on a roster. It's kind of the same deal. Like he's a bubble player, like whether he's a back end of your rotation or not, you don't know. And then if he's not in the back end of your rotation, you might be able to get someone a little bit younger that a second round pick that you're going to spend some time developing and stuff like that. So yeah, and on that note, like, is there a reason why you would go with someone like Noel at this point as opposed to just saying, hey, why not just bring back Terrence Davis?
Um, that's a good question. I think that's a question probably easily more answered by the agents of those two players. And I'm thinking of reason, looking at the Warriors too. Like the Warriors just went out and got Rudy Gay
Yeah.
to battle for a training camp roster. And I think some of these players would rather not be looked at as tertiary pieces that are battling for training camp spots and would rather sign guaranteed contracts or perceived guaranteed contracts, or at least a 1 year deal that sets them up a little bit better. And I think with somebody like Terrence Davis, the realization that there are a lot of teams that he doesn't necessarily fit right now to, and would be more of a, well, let's see what it looks like. Come on in and let's see if you can battle here and earn a spot, as opposed to coming in and actually having one that's notched, kind of carved out for you a little bit. Sometimes that, and I think you can use Jeremy Lamb as an example. I mean, he's 31. You're talking about Noel, who's, what'd you say, 20, 21
24.
or
24.
24, excuse me. I was, yeah, 20, 24. I mean, there's such a vast contrast in experience and age there, but certainly offensive pop, what you've seen with Noel, and you've seen a guy who's been able to fit in very, very well with Minnesota. But even still, like, why wouldn't Minnesota have them, have him come back? Maybe he's expecting more. And then as the summer goes on, oh my gosh, you have training camp right around the corner. Now you have to sign somewhere. Not speaking for Terrence Davis, but that could be a situation where maybe he's just better off waiting to see some of the training camp uh, pieces kind of work themselves out and then try to hop on somewhere. I don't know. I think it's a tough. I think it's a tough evolution, if you will. Like, it's like at one point you were a guy who thought of with a, you know, possibility of being a future of a team, and you signed a contract, and or excuse me, you come to a different team, and it represents a fresh start. But it's not like you were a rotational piece or a steady rotational piece.
Yeah.
Certainly, you've shown flashes of what you can do, and I think for the players who tend to be a little bit more one dimensional, and what I mean by that is you're only known for one thing in terms of, oh, you can score the basketball. That's great. but what else can you do, and what else do you excel at? And because everybody in this league, James, most of them can all score the basketball. And if you can't, let's pretend you're not a good shooter. Well, you're usually really, really good at 2 or 3 other things, which gives you a nice niche and can bring you onto a squad to give you a home. And with respect to Terrence Davis, who really plays hard, I feel, and goes out there and competes and all that, what's the one thing you would say he does really, really well outside of kind of getting on a streak and scoring the basketball? That's hard. That's kind of harder to find.
Yeah.
So Jaylen might fit that kind of same path a little bit. And certainly there can be room for guys in the league or on teams for guys like that. But teams like to fill their rotations or in their rosters with guys that can do a lot of things on the floor very, very well.
Yeah, and I would say the second that the Kings traded for Chris Duarte, that was the end of Terrence Davis in Sacramento. And I'll bring this up too. Like, we already look at this team and we see that there's like a 9.5, 10-man rotation already set. Like, you see the rotation, and whether, Trey Lyles plays in a game or they go with JaVale McGee, like, you can see like who the top 10 guys are and even who the top 11 guys are. And then we start getting into like an Alex Len, who was kind of a break-in case of emergency player last year and will probably be in the same role this year. Maybe he'll have a little bit more opportunity, but I don't think so. And then after him, you start getting into like the Kessler Edwards and Colby Jones, and all of a sudden we're out of roster spots. And this team is deep. And if you were going to go back to Terrence Davis and try to bring him back in, it would be telling Terrence Davis, like, we'll consider you bringing you back maybe, but you're going to be like the 12th or 13th guy on this roster, which means that your opportunity is not going to be there. So maybe it's better for you to go find a different opportunity out there. And I think, again, with Chris Duarte, you bring in a guy like him who he can fill the offensive game that we saw from Terrence Davis. He's not the crazy streaky, get you 30 points every once in a while type player, but he's a really good defender, and he brings something else to the game that Terrence didn't. And so I understand why they went and upgraded that position. And I also understand why they'd kick the tires on a player like Terrence Davis, just in case. Like, it's okay to have an electric scorer hiding deep on your bench just in case. And if somehow he does make the roster, okay,
Definitely.
yeah, that would make sense to me. Sean, do you think there's any? We've got training camp starting on Tuesday. We've got media day. First of all, what are you excited to see on Monday with media day? Is there a player or something that you want to see just on that first day? Because it's like back to school day for us. Like, everyone's out there and you're waiting to see like who came in 8 pounds lighter or 6 pounds heavier or whatever. There is like that just wanting to get your eyes on the player's deal.
No.
No,
I mean, I wish I could play the part. It's nothing. Media day is just a drain. It's not.
it is.
First of all, it's not a drain for us. I mean, necessarily. It's just it's a necessary evil. We get it, but it's just not the best for anybody. It's like they rotate. The player for all from station to station. They're usually pretty in good spirits, I would say.
Yeah.
And there's some fun moments that tend to come from media day, and a lot of them tend to be with a little, game night stuff that they do that find their way into a lot of the little stuff that you see on the video board during timeouts of games, and those are all very, very fun and unique and creative, and those are great. But then you go talk to the media, and it's a lot of the same questions. What did you do on the summer? What do you get better? What are the goals? How do you get? So it's I don't think there's a lot that's learned from media day. There are exceptions. I mean, I can remember when Vince Carter was a Sacramento King, which is one of the coolest things as a media member you can have covering a Sacramento team, because that's where you look and go, oh, there's a Hall of Fame player that I get to actually cover in this league that has come
And
through
talk to.
Sacramento. Don't get to do that a whole lot. And even if he is on the tail end of his career, I mean, that's that's a freaking legend there, and he fit the part. Like he was a dream from a media standpoint. And I think De'Aaron Fox going into his first year with Luke Walton was I remember that media scrum very, very well. I remember there was a lot that to me signified a moment where De'Aaron was on a different wavelength than what he was in previous years, where basketball all of a sudden was I don't want to call it a business or a job, but it might not have been as fun as it once was, if that makes sense. And I think if people go back and watch that media day scrum, you might pick up what I'm laying down there, because
He
I just
lost his
remember.
joy. Yeah.
Nah, I wouldn't even call it that. It's just um, it signified a looking around, saying, I'm looking at other NBA teams and we're not getting better. I look at I'm speaking from a De'Aaron Fox standpoint, but I think he put a lot of that on himself as well. But it was clearly like the I need help kind of a thing, and that's even before Tyrese Halliburton had landed in Sacramento too. So, yeah, there was if you James likes to call it joy. I just feel like there was that was the most noticeable moment, and you're going into a season where it just doesn't everyone in media day feels great from a player standpoint because no one's lost yet. So everyone has these upswings of, oh yeah, we can do this, and it's a lot of optimism, as it probably should be. But I think that team was very you probably shouldn't have had much optimism around that team because it wasn't very good. But there were ways to get better, and there were ways to improve for a lot of players, and I think the goals were a little bit more realistic than playoffs and postseason, and they just a little bit smaller and attainable goals at that point. So, um, as far as this Monday, though, I think everyone's going to be very, very happy because they're coming off of a very, very successful season, and I think there's an excitement for this team to be able to build upon what they did last year and improve upon what they did last year and show that last year was no fluke and to replicate last year. And I think all eyes are going to go kind of in the way of Keegan Murray, see how much he's added because he's noticeably bigger. And we've seen that throughout the various moments we've been able to interact with him in the summer. And I think a lot of it will go to Sasha Vezenkov as well, because you're going to see him in a Kings uniform for the first time, and that'll be neat. But really, getting beyond Monday, my focus is all Tuesday, because Tuesday is where I think that you just get a little bit more excited, and some of the media tends to thin out a little bit more. Even though I do think we're going to have a lot of media attention this year, which is good, but
I think so
yeah,
too.
media day. I do think that's a good thing, but yeah, I think it'll finally get a little bit more about basketball and what lies ahead, and then get into training camp and the minutia of everything, and that to me will be a little bit more fun.
Yeah, I think Sean and I are so used to we get done with media day, and then by like the fourth day of training camp, it's me, Sean, and Jason Anderson from the B, and that's it.
Yeah,
And that's
for a
just
while.
not gonna be the case anymore. That, like, this year, there's gonna be a lot of media co and there has been an uptick in media coverage, whether it's the other local stations covering more or it's, it's more writers popping up from different outlets, or it seems like this weird thing we have going on right now where just a bunch of writers have moved to Sacramento in the Sacramento metropolitan area over the last, like I'd say, 2 or 3 years, whether it's Chris Haynes or Anthony Slater. So we have more of those guys who don't really cover the Kings, but who cover other teams or cover national stuff. And so we might have a few more people around, especially with, the Kings actually showing up and being good last season.
Being
Um,
relevant is the word there, and to be in, that's the best part. I mean, people who live in the Sacramento region, they already know that it's a great place to live. But if you're an NBA national person, it's like this is a great spot because you've got the Warriors right down the street. You've got a short plane ride to LA, to Phoenix, to LA, even Denver and Utah, so and Portland. So
yeah,
it's very convenient. Plus, like, let's be honest, when the visiting teams come through, You don't have to deal with the masses in bigger cities, so it gives you great access to a lot of those visiting teams when they pop through Sacramento.
Yeah, I totally agree. And we'll like Sam Amick has always lived here, but we'll just add him to that group as well as someone who pops in, friend of the show here, Sam. Sean, let's get to the big news of the week, which is not Kings related.
What was that?
Yeah, did you miss while you were at a concert, did you miss that Damian Lillard was traded to the Milwaukee Bucks?
I did
Uh,
not. Sorry, Miami.
Wild. Man, we were right in the middle of a show, Kyle and I, and we go to break and we were going to talk about the weird stuff that Channing Frye had talked about with like he's played in games that he thought were rigged, but whether it was just like not who's going to win or lose a game, but more about like point spreads and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were all lined up. We go to break just as we're about to come out of break, like 30 seconds left. I said, "Oh my gosh, Kyle, the Blazers just traded Damian Lillard to the Milwaukee Bucks for Drew Holiday, and DeAndre Ayton's going to Portland." And like it was jarring and it was crazy. What was your initial thoughts? Like, because I kind of like the trade. I want to see what they get for Drew before I make a final judgment on what I think Portland got for their franchise player. But I kind of like there's so many aspects to this trade that I think are cool. Like I think it's cool that Damian Lillard did not get to go to the Miami Heat, and I think like whatever he does going forward will feel more authentic and more on brand with who Dame has always been because he went to a smaller market like Milwaukee. Even if they did win a championship recently, even if they do have Giannis Antetokounmpo, I don't care. Just that landing spot feels more authentic for him.
I mean, I felt like my brain was scrambled. That I was like, how on earth did that happen? And I don't know about you, James, but I love when I actually see something that can surprise you when you don't have a whole lot of like linkage or reports that are. I'll give you an example. Let's go back even further when transactions and internet and gossip and rumor wasn't what it once was. But then we can make it Kings oriented because before Peja Stojakovic ever found his way to Indiana and Ron Artest found his way to Sacramento, that had been a rumored trade for like over a year.
Yeah.
And it was like nonstop. And obviously with all the, stuff that had happened with Artest and with the Pacers and obviously the brawl and all that stuff, my goodness, to see him in a Kings uniform, was kind of like, well, we heard about it for so long, to see it finally happen is weird. I love when you can just see something that comes out of nowhere and no one had a finger on the pulse of what was going to happen, because if you remember just a day or two before that, the Toronto rumors were really heating up, much like, I think Kings fans can kind of relate because there's been so much noise around Toronto for really the better part of 2 seasons. What'll happen with Pascal Siakam? What'll happen with OG Anunoby? Like, what direction is this Raptors team going? And even seeing going back to the trade deadline last year, where they looked like to become players rather than sellers, even kind of surprised some people. But to see Milwaukee go out and do that to let's face it, I do think it was a franchise that needed a little bit of a shaking up. I didn't expect it to be Drew Holiday, and I didn't expect it to be Damian Lillard coming over. But once they kind of re-upped Chris Middleton, how do you keep Giannis happy? That's the overall kind of theme in the background that's just kind of haunting the organization, is like, will he sign this extension? Will he commit to Milwaukee long term? And that's always seems to be the question mark. Like, what will happen with Giannis and the Bucks? And going out there and having the report, I know Brian Windhorst shed light on this just yesterday, where they can go out as an organization and pull a trigger on that, and you're thinking, well, they have to have had Giannis's blessing to trade an all-star like Drew Holiday, right? Evidently not. So to me, I think it was brilliant that the Bucks could do something like this, because even though, yes, like Dame Lillard is a little bit longer in the tooth in the sense of, but if something happens to Giannis and he bounces and goes elsewhere, That's a pretty nice piece to still have around your organization and try to build around to be successful. I don't get me wrong, losing Giannis would be a colossal fucking failure. I'm not saying that Dame Lillard makes it any better, but in a weird way it does. It's if you have to start over again and you have Dame Lillard and some really nice pieces, and the fact that you lost Giannis, I mean, it'll be easier to recover from than doing a huge reset, in my opinion. So I do think, but I think on the flip side of that coin is that I think the pairing of Giannis with a lot of these veteran pieces that they already have that have championship experience with Damian Lillard, who would love to get to that plateau, I think is going to be beautiful for them. I think it's an absolute perfect pairing, and I think it's going to go really, really well in Milwaukee.
Yeah, I'll say this. I think the Milwaukee Bucks are uniquely built to take on a poor defensive player like Damian Lillard. The length of Giannis, the length of Middleton, the defensive. Brooke Lopez was second in Defensive Player of the Year voting. So you have, and Bobby Portis is excellent defender. You have all these
Right.
mechanisms in place to support them, and his ability. I was surprised by this, but last season he shot like 30. He averaged over 33 points per game, but he shot 37.4% from three, I believe is the number. And Drew Holiday was actually a better 3-point shooter than him. But that doesn't matter. The fear of Dame, what he does to a team on the offensive end, the fact that you have to pick him up at midcourt and that you can't allow him even a little bit of space at 35 feet because he'll just hoist and hit, it just changes everything for that team. I mean, that's going to be one of the most devastating duos. And I know this week, like Kyle and I on the Insiders, we talked a lot about like who are the best duos in the game. Like that instantly becomes like the first or second or third best duo in the game. I don't think there's any question. And I
Yeah.
also like again, I feel like if he would have gone to Miami, like he would have spent the next like 3 or 4 years getting, especially if they won, getting the Kevin Durant treatment where people around the league are like, well, you just went somewhere to win and that's trash, but I just don't feel that you have that same understanding about the Milwaukee Bucks because sure, they've been good and they've won a title here, but at the same time, they're not a perennial title contender for the last 3 decades where you're always thinking of them in that light. They've had moments where they were good, like in the early 2000s, but they've also had other moments where they're bad, and they're a team a lot like Portland, where any like sort of star quality that they've had has had to be homegrown. Like Giannis is a homegrown guy, Middleton homegrown, but Michael Redd, just keep going back like throughout their history. They've done a good job of doing exactly what Portland tried to do for years, and that is draft well and like develop players and try to keep them in your city and try to sell them on, being the big fish in a little pond. And so this was huge. I thought it was incredible to watch it all play out. I thought the postmortem got filthy like right away, and it was weird. There's almost like a buildup to it, right? It was like you saw someone come out with a little bit of reporting on some of the wonkiness with the transaction, and then all of a sudden Amick comes out with his. But Amick's was pretty tame. It was pretty like balanced and nice, and like it kind of told both sides. And then Chris Haynes' piece clearly, and I think he was open about it. It was from Dame's side, his point, the agent and Dame's point of view, with quotes and everything else. I mean, it was wild, but just throwing the Bucks. I mean just throwing
Yeah.
Joe Cronin under the bus. Like they threw him under the bus and then they put it in reverse and backed it up over him and ran him over again and then tried to reverse again and made sure he was nice and flat. Like that was a violent way to see a trade. Like going all the way to the hey, we tried to rescind our trade request. Like, wait a sec, did you really like this? Like
Yeah.
it's pretty
This is
ugly.
gross. It's just gross. And look, it kind of reminds me a lot about the KG Minneapolis situation. I mean, that guy can't really he doesn't really go back there, and that has to do more so with ownership than it does with really, I think, the front office. But one kind of bleeds into the other, and the last thing I want to see is a situation where Dame Lillard doesn't go back to Portland, where he's celebrated and means a lot to that city and that franchise, even though, look, they didn't win anything. But it's a lot like, look, when Mitch Richmond's tenure ended in Sacramento, it wasn't the best. It
No,
needed to happen.
and it
It wasn't the
lasted.
best, and
It's
it
still,
got
yeah,
ugly.
yeah,
But that also had to do more with money than really anything else. And the NBA and contracts were a lot different back then. And the problem for Mitch Richmond was he wasn't paid market value playing in Sacramento. And granted, they weren't good. So he was a nice fish in a small pond. And yes, he was the second best two guard, arguably in my opinion. It's not arguably, but arguably in the NBA. And he was not nearly paid like it, and so it got ugly. And you don't see Mitch Richmond in Sacramento a whole lot anymore. And I those people are long gone. There's obviously ties to the organization he still has that are a little different, but um, KG doesn't go to Minneapolis, and Glenn Taylor is gone. You've
yeah.
got Alex Rodriguez coming in, and KG hopefully will be celebrated the way he should be, and hopefully some of those things get ironed out. But I don't want to see that happen with Dame Lillard and Portland. You don't want to see your star player, who's part of the fabric of your organization and one of the faces of your organization for the better part of 2 decades, not be welcome back. And I'd also caution Dame Lillard, like, you may have some strong feelings towards members of that organization, and I think he's done a decent job for the most part. I think there would be a lot of Blazer fans who disagree, but I still think he's done a decent job separating the two, of Portland and the fans. And because I'm glad, and I also, because of this, what I'm about to say is, like, I'm happy that this trade has happened even before training camp opens. I'm glad Dame Lillard is out of Portland. Essentially got what he wanted. Yeah, it's not to the destination that he wanted it to be, but also screw you. Like, you don't hold the cards here. Like, they can do everything in their power to put you in a good situation, but they're going to do what's best for their team. And that's how it is. And you may have these places where you'd like to go, but at the end of the day, they don't have to trade you. And I've said as much with the whole Kawhi Leonard situation when it was back in San Antonio. It worked out, fortunately, for Toronto, but they don't have to trade you right away. So I'm glad it didn't get to a part where that city and that organization and those fans of that organization are booing Lillard. I mean, can you imagine if he went out there and didn't play? I mean, I would imagine he would, but even still, like, you don't want to see a guy who represents your franchise for as long as he has and been the face of it get booed by that fan base. It just gets ugly.
Yeah, and I also think, like, you just look at the way that this team is built and, like, their future moving forward. It's gonna be really tough for Joe Cronin to, like, survive, like, a rebuild, right? He's gotta hit, like, every single one of these things, and he already hasn't hit on a couple. And I really like Scoot Henderson, I like Shaden Sharp, but 4 years from now, when Damian Lillard's contract is up, like, I think there's a way for him to walk back in the door. And I think there will be a different group of people likely running the franchise. And that's not me, like, calling my shot now. I'm just like, that's the way this game
Sure.
goes, right? And so I think that, like, bygones will be bygones. And I also think he's handled himself, like, okay. I think just the process and the agent involvement, and I love Aaron Goodwin. I think he's a good guy, but, like, all of this stuff, it left you the whole time kind of feeling like this wasn't, like, one of the better transactions that we've seen go down in the league. It real quick here, Sean. DeAndre Ayton, what do you think of him in Portland? And do you think they at least got it on a path here, or is that something you would not have done?
No, I actually look. I think it's a better deal than anything they would have gotten from Miami, and attaching another
Yeah.
team to it like Phoenix to get yourself a nice, a guy who, let's face it, probably needed to change the scenery. Even Monty Williams being gone and him having the run, Chris Paul out of that locker room, they're going in a different direction in Phoenix. And I think Aiton could have been a part of it, but I think him going to a younger team, one that doesn't have expectations on it, I think kind of gives him a little bit more breathing room to help his development. And I think playing with so many young guards and guys that are going to be looking for him to run the floor and be something that maybe he couldn't be in Phoenix, playing in a style that really kind of dribbles the shit out of the basketball and finds a shooter and has a superstar in KD. I mean, it's tougher. So I think he's going to be allowed to make mistakes. I think he's still a very, very young player that, in my opinion, needs further development. And I think putting him with a coach like, I don't think Chauncey Billups is a bad coach, and I think he can help development. And I think DeAndre Ayton will fit in nicely with some of these pieces. But I think even though he's a little more of a veteran than a lot of the younger pieces on the Blazers team, I think he's right in line with needing some hand holding along the way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I like him better with Scoot Henderson than I do with the guys that are going to be running the show, and whether it's Booker or whether it's Bradley Bill, whoever it is
Right.
running the point there. I like Ayton in a pick and roll with Scoot and with Shaden Sharp, and I think Ayton is probably going to average 20 something points a game, and like his numbers will look way better in Portland. I don't know if he'll be a better player. I just know
Right.
his numbers are due for like a gigantic leap. If he averaged 24 and 11 this year, I wouldn't be shocked.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at what the Suns got, right? Like you're getting role players, guys that understand what their role will be on a team that features people like Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, and Kevin Durant. And it's exactly what you want. You've got a guy in Nurkic that obviously hasn't not been able to stay healthy. I mean, that's been such the knock on him. And if he can
Yep.
somehow stay healthy, I think he'd be a nice fit with these players, even Grayson Allen, even some of the other pieces that they've added. I mean, these are guys that come in and automatically know what they're supposed to do on this team. And I think DeAndre Ayton coming to Phoenix now has a little bit more of a ceiling where it's like, okay, look at this. I can spread my legs here. I can kind of get some necessary development and be able
Your
to
wings, spread your wings. There we go.
well, I also say kick your legs out too, because I mean, not spread your legs, that's terrible, but like kick your feet up, man. Like seriously, you've got some room you
uh,
got some room here now. Take
I
occupy
agree.
some space.
I think it gives Ayton like the potential to blow up. I also think like if you take Nurkic and you take Grayson Allen, they're both they have an edge to them. There's a physicality to them,
Right.
even like a dirtiness at some point to them, and I think that's something that Phoenix needed big time. Like the physicality of those two players, and the fact that all of a sudden you've got Nurkic, who to me he's not as good as Aiton, but he sets a much better screen, a screen with elbows that people feel, and that's not something that Aiton was going to do. And then I also think the sneaky thing here, I think Nasir Little might
Right.
be like the steal of that trade for Phoenix. Nasir Little is a guy who Portland was in love with him like 2 years ago, and he's that long, athletic, defensive guy that they really needed. I don't even think they had a starting five before he lands there, and I think now he could even find his way to a starting job, starting in the front court alongside Nurkic and Kevin Durant. So I think that's a really really solid pickup. Um, I'm going to ask you this one, and I kind of have my answer already. Like, sure, but I don't think there's any way to do it. But if you're the Kings, are you calling at least on the Drew Holiday situation?
I mean, do some due diligence, right? What would it take to acquire? You'd kind of
Yeah,
need to know. But yeah, I don't really see anything happening there. And I think again, like when people look at what Portland did, it's like, yeah, you can move Drew Holiday if you want. I think most people would probably expect them to do so, with the respect to Drew Holiday. But at the same time, it's like having him and Scoot and you know, I mean, maybe that. I mean, with Simons over there, I mean, you got a lot of interesting pieces. I don't know how well it all fits, but I don't know that you have to. I think you could be. I mean, you just traded an all star and landed an all star. You know what I mean? You weren't going to
I
do that really with Miami.
No, that's true, and I would also, if I'm Portland, I'd at least consider holding on to him till December 15th
Yes.
or January 1st. Because then you open yourself up to other teams. So, like the Sacramento Kings, right now, for the Kings to trade for Drew Holiday would be nearly impossible. Just the dollars and cents, it just doesn't work out because he makes like 37 million bucks, and you got to be within 125% of that because you're a cap team, your team is over the cap in order to make that trade. And the Kings could probably do it, but it would have to be like a 5-for-1. It would have to be like, and I'm just gonna like, this isn't me saying I would trade this but the numbers wise, it would cost you Davion Mitchell, it would cost you Kevin Herter, it would cost you Chris Duarte, and then it would cost you two more minimum scale players. So you'd have to throw like Kessler Edwards and Colby Jones in there. It'd have to be a 5-for-1 in order for the actual contract to work out. And that's really tough to do the weekend before training camp starts. Now,
And with respect to even that, and if you're Portland, you're going, yeah, that's not good enough. I
well, I
want a
mean,
first round pick. I want,
you're gonna
there's
give them picks and stuff like that. Like, the Kings have picks and all that, but, I mean, I think that's where you start, and I'm just talking about the nuts and bolts of what would work in a contract. I
right.
guess you could do something with, Malik Monk, but the Kings, I don't believe are in any world where they consider that, as part of a deal, and so, like, how do you go out and get a player like that? I don't know. It would be very difficult. Now, you get to December 15th, and all of a sudden, Trey Lyles' contract is tradable. You get to December 29th, and Harrison Barnes' contract is tradable. Now we're talking about potential three-team deals and like who lands where. Again, if Portland wants to bring in a DeAndre Ayton who's 25, 26, I it wouldn't be outside of the realm of possibility that they would look at Davion Mitchell and Kevin Herter and Chris Duarte as part of a young core that moves forward with DeAndre Ayton, and they still have Jeremy Grant. So I'm not saying that would be like a deal that wouldn't work for Portland, especially if you have draft capital, but it would gut all your depth if you're the Kings, and it would totally change everything that you did this offseason, which was run it back, continuity, keep the team together, see what they can do year two. But that doesn't change the fact that I think Drew Holiday in a backcourt with De'Aaron Fox would be incredible.
So did uh, you just said that? Of course, it would be incredible. That'd be it. I was gonna brush that conversation away and kind of restart there a little bit with a different conversation, but yeah, that would be awesome. That'd be absolutely awesome, and it'd be something that, especially with somebody like Sabonis still on the team, and some of the shooting that they would have around them. Yeah, it would be incredible. But to
Yeah,
pivot away from
defensively.
that a little bit,
Yeah.
to
Go ahead.
pivot, how do you look at Phoenix now? Did they get better in your? I mean, I think they got better, no question. But does that do anything to where you look at them any differently in the? I don't know where you had them pegged before that trade in terms of where they rank in the West. I think in some of the early, you know, discussions that we'd had, you had some question marks around Phoenix a little bit. How about now?
I did. I had a ton of question marks. Like I like the addition to the depth, and like, look, I don't like Grayson Allen as a player. I know
How
he's one of
dare
your
you?
your dookies. I know, but I don't like him as a player. I do like that he can space the floor and he gives them another 3-point shooter because I think that team needed it. They need somebody who
Athletic as hell
plays,
too.
and he plays without the ball in his hands, right? So he's an off-ball player, which I think is something that when you have all those superstars, you need. If Nurkic could stay healthy, then I actually like him a little bit better for that team than I do Aiden, even though I think Aiden is a much better player. And then I think the Nasir Little addition, again, they were looking at having to start like Eric Gordon at power forward or at small forward. And that's not quality, especially just at his age and everything else. Like,
Right.
that's not something. And they were going to have to rely on this group of players. A lot of people, oh, I like that signing. I like this signing, whether it's Shemezi Metu or they brought in a couple of like interesting guys who are role players. none of them were championship quality role players that you can depend on today and know what you're going to get moving forward. Like the Golden State Warriors in their heyday, not only do they have a great starting five, but then they bring like David West off the bench. They bring Sean Livingston off the bench. They bring Andre Iguodala off the bench. Like the Warriors didn't, I mean, the Suns did not have that before this trade. And I just think that their depth got better. Like, again, Grayson Allen started like 60 plus games last season for Milwaukee. Like, you're getting a starter. You're getting, starting center, a guy who's going to be like probably the sixth man or seventh man in your rotation in Grayson Allen. Like, I think you did okay.
Yeah,
I think
and I know
better.
it's a big question mark if Nurkic is going to be the Bosnian beast that he is when he's healthy. But I
Yeah,
like the fact that Phoenix went out and got a bunch of dudes that have some edge to them.
I agree.
Every one of them are like some physical type player who has an attitude, who can bring it. Like they all have a dog in them basically, and you're putting them on with a team that, let's face it, like Devin Booker gets the is like gets under the skin of opposition, whether he adds some of these pieces or not. He tends to do that. Does it with the Kings team with regularity. And I feel like all of a sudden this team kind of has a little bit of a dickhead to them. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
they do. And
I don't think
and
they were
yeah, but to that
soft.
point, like no, I don't think they were soft either. But I think that there
I think
was
they were more like I don't know. There's a different vibe that you get from them, like almost
right. They're
like
I think from a competitive standpoint, they're better. Like they're
yeah,
instantly better.
yeah, yeah,
And I do think that it makes you look at Phoenix a little bit differently. I mean, obviously Portland you're still looking at as a non-factor in the West. So if your Kings, if you're looking at how your Kings shape up with the way the West stacks up, I think Phoenix got. I mean, yes, it's fair to say Phoenix I think does get better, but I still, if anyone had any doubts, it's like no, I think Phoenix is going to be at least at worst case a top 5 team, barring
yeah. Oh
injury.
no, like in the Western Conference? No, I totally agree.
Correct. Yeah,
Actually, it brings us to we'll finish up here with the business of basketball.
there it is.
Sean, it's a great segue to the business of basketball because Vegas just put out at least according to one outlet, one betting outlet that Shams had tweeted out. They put the top 10 teams for betting odds with regards to the NBA finals, right? And I think it's an interesting list, and you're like, okay, it sort of does make sense. Some of it does make sense, but I'm gonna pull it up really fast. Like, I think the favorites to win are now the Bucks at plus 360. The second team is the Celtics at plus 500, and then the Suns at
Mhm.
plus 550. Then for some reason, all of those teams are above the Nuggets at plus 650. Who the Nuggets are still the best team in basketball. I don't have any qualms about that. I don't have any problem saying that in my mind. The
Hmm.
Lakers are the number 5 team at plus 1,200.
Okay.
Then the Warriors are plus 1,700. Then the Cavs at plus 1,800. And then the number 8 team is a surprising Grizzlies at plus 2,000.
Hmm.
Number 9 is the Clippers at plus 2,100. And then number 10 is the Philadelphia 76ers, who are a plus 2,400. So, first of all, the Sixers have been devalued greatly in this, but which they're running out there with basically the same team they had last year. Uh, I find it interesting that there's 6 Western Conference teams in that list, and not one of them are the Sacramento Kings. Is that
That's
surprising
okay.
to you?
No, no, it's not. No, Vegas hates the Kings. That's fine. Like
Okay.
if you're a Kings fan, yeah, go out there and bet differently, and hopefully you win some money. But yeah, no, it's not surprising. No, why would it be surprising?
I don't know what the Kings are. I would say they're probably like just looking at that list, probably like plus 3,000. But still, I'm if I'm looking at the Kings, like from the outside, not as someone who
Mhm.
covers the team. And I looked at they were the 3rd seed in the Western Conference. They won 48 games. They didn't do anything to take a step back where a lot of teams did. They didn't do anything to take some giant leap forward other than continuity and other than, sticking with the same coaching staff and the same star players. But I would at least have to consider them a top 10 team in the league. I mean, because as of last year, I think they're number 6 to finish in wins to finish the season. Like, I don't know how you devalue a team that much. And I guess there's a difference between predicting who's going to be there in the end and I guess wins and loss totals and then I guess who's going to win a championship. So
I will say of all the teams you rattled off there, the Memphis one to me was the most surprising.
not the Cavs.
The Cavs were surprising as well, but no, I will take the Cavs. That would be probably the next surprising one, but I would take the Grizzlies to me as the most surprising that they fell there.
Yeah, I would bet against the Grizzlies heavily in
Yeah,
that situation. Like
for
just
sure.
because, again, I don't think the Grizzlies have done enough in the offseason. They added Marcus Smart, but at the same time, they lost Tyus Jones and they lost Dylan Brooks, and then you still have, um, your best players out for the first 25 games of the season. And
Right.
so, like Marcus Smart is a good player, but I don't think there's a
Very good
huge
player.
difference between Marcus Smart and Dylan Brooks. Like realistically, there's not that much of a difference between those two players. They're both all NBA defenders. They're both, like erratic offensive players. Like they're both instigators, but in different ways, I guess. Like I think Marcus Smart is a better cultural piece for your team. I'm not saying that, but as far as like the nuts and bolts of what they bring to the court, I don't think that there's a huge difference. And then I think losing one of the best, if not the best, backup point guard in the NBA, that was a huge loss for them.
Yeah. So if you Yeah, I don't know. Vegas, first of all, if no one should be offended by anything in a preseason, whatever report, poll.
No,
Vegas, the prognostication of where the Kings will finish, because I'm of the opinion, and I've talked about this in recent podcasts, and I don't know that if you agree with this, but I feel that the Kings can finish worse in the division or in the conference, I guess, in the Western Conference. They could finish, let's say, 6th, 5th, whatever
okay,
you peg them in.
yeah.
And I feel that they can be better suited for a longer playoff run than they were this past year.
Oh, I
I think
totally
I
agree.
think this team can be better, and I think they are better, and I think they will be better. But they don't need to finish third, to second, or first to become better. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I totally agree. And then I would also say this, Sean. They're also a team that skipped a few steps last year. Like, we can all acknowledge that. Like,
Yeah.
no one expected
Right.
the Sacramento Kings to be that good. They skipped a few steps in their development, and that's okay. But I also think that they're one of those teams that oftentimes when you skip steps like this, you go into the next offseason, you go into the next season, and you try to win, 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 win all season long to prove that that's who you were. Right. And so I also wouldn't be surprised if the Kings end up being the 1 seed or the 2 seed in the Western Conference and win a whole bunch of games because they're not doing what a team who's been there multiple times does, which is take a step back and realize that you can give up 4 or 5, 6 wins in the regular season that may help you become better in the postseason, where they're
Sure.
resting players or like strategy or whatever it might be. There's a way that you can balance out. So I could see the Kings being one of those teams that jump up and win way more games than anyone expects. And you're like, holy cow, this team's good. But you're also confused on whether they're going to be that good in the playoffs
Yeah.
because, we look at the Warriors when they win 73 and they don't win the title. They win 67 and win a title. They win 73 and are the greatest win-loss team in the history of the NBA, and they don't win a title because they put a lot on trying to get that 73 wins. And I think that's what happens in the early maturation cycle of a team who's ascending.
There's a ton of NBA coaches that are sitting down right now before opening up of training camp, and they've had the ability to watch. Like by now, really, all NBA teams, all rosters are pretty much in town, and they've been working out with everybody. And coaches like Mike Brown have been able to sit on the sidelines and or up in a tower that is kind of situated at Golden One Center and be able to kind of observe how some of these workouts have gone. And a lot of coaches look around and go, okay, from a roster standpoint, 1 through wherever on my roster, there's many of them that go, okay, there's question mark here, question mark here, question mark here. You got maybe 3 or 4 on most teams where you don't know what your people are 1 through 8, 1 through 9, 1 through 10. Mike Brown can go pretty far on his roster sheet before he runs into his first question mark.
11.
And that's
11.
it. Well, and even let's pretend it's 8. Okay, let's just pretend for the sake of argument it's higher up there.
Okay.
It's 7 or 8, right?
Yeah, because we
That's a
could put the
good
question
thing.
mark. Yeah, we could put the
Right.
question mark on Sasha Vezenkov. We can put the question mark on Davion Mitchell. We can like some of these players. Trey Lyles hasn't really committed.
Trey Lyles, yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
there,
yeah.
even if it's higher up, right? The amount of question marks are fewer. Okay, 1 through 5, you know what you got. 6, 7, 8, like that's when maybe you start getting into a little bit of a head scratch. But it's the point here is he has trust in so much of his roster based off of what's already happened and transpired. Now, again, I always kind of preface there's no analytic for chemistry. So just because one thing worked last year and you make a couple moves, how does that affect this team? That can still be we'll find that out. But it's very possible that this team is increases in win total, increases from 3, goes up to 2 or 1 in the West. Very possible. While I wouldn't pick it, I still think that this team is going to benefit greatly from that continuity and position themselves really, really nicely to where they have a harder decision to make come trade deadline than they did last year. And if you remember last year, everything was trending up. People were like, you gotta go in and you gotta spend. This is like baseball. You gotta throw everything at it and get your utility player, get that person here that puts you over the top. And they showed some with the exception of picking up Kessler Edwards, they showed some patience there, and they didn't burn out picks to go out and get somebody like a Matisse Thybulle or Mason Plumlee or somebody like that, or even JaVale McGee, who becomes available a year later, or not even a year later, an off
Yeah,
season
6 months
later.
later. Yeah.
So I think it'll be curious to see if they have that, whether it be success, that riding that wave of success into the All-Star break and the trade deadline before that, or let's say it's not working. Maybe let's say there's some scuffles along the way and you're looking more like a team that isn't quite there. How does that type of wave, be it positive or negative or even a little bit of disappointment, affect the decision making come trade deadline? And I think that's going to be really interesting to see.
Yeah, I totally agree. And especially at the trade deadline, you have a lot more contractually available to you than you do today.
Right.
And like you have a lot available. And a guy that you've chased multiple times, if the Toronto Raptors have fallen by the wayside, is there a possibility that they'll reconsider a Siakam or an OG Anunoby because they're coming into the final months of their tenure there, especially after losing Fred VanVleet last year? Um, are there other players around the league? Is again the Cavs? Do the Cavs fall by the wayside and have a weird season? And is Donovan Mitchell become a player that could possibly be on the move? Like there are all of these aspects. The Kings are still positioned not only to have the contracts to move for a player, but also to have all of their first round picks after 2000, their 2014. If they're, I mean, they're 2024. If they're a playoff team, they already know their pick is gone, but that also means that they'll have their 26, 28, and 30 to go work with. So yeah, it should be interesting, Sean. Like we could have got into an argument there and extended this podcast out for like another 20 minutes. The what if they would have gone out and got Matisse Thybulle at
Right.
the trade deadline and not stood pat, or what if they would have gone out and got a Mason Plumlee and a Matisse Thybulle, and what would that have looked like in the playoffs? Because those are two things that I think we can look at and say, huh, Okay. They struggle with perimeter defense, and they struggled to get rebounds and to combat the big man in the post.
Well,
Just
especially in
saying,
that Warrior
Sean.
series. Yeah, the Warrior series too.
There was only one series, Sean. It was the
That's
Warriors
it.
series. That's 7 games. Do you think that those two could have actually made a difference in the 7-game series? And the answer is we don't know. It's possible. That's we could have had that debate this summer and had it been a summer topic, and we didn't. All right, Sean's got to get to his stuff, and I have an event to get to. Sean, do you
Yeah,
have
what's that
any?
event? What's your event?
I don't want to
I think
talk
you
about
should.
it,
Oh, you don't
Sean.
want to? Oh, okay, damn it.
It's
Sorry.
fine.
You
I
can
have
edit that out.
my high school
We don't.
reunion tonight. One of my high school reunions. So I'm not saying what year, but I have a high school reunion tonight, and I'm excited to go because I have a lot of friends that I haven't seen in a long time, and these are fun things to go to. But
That's
yeah,
cool.
yeah, the wife is not looking forward to it so much.
I went to more than one high school, so to me it doesn't have the same kind of thing.
See,
But
and that's where it's different.
yeah,
My dad went to 12 different schools growing up. He was a farm
12.
kid.
Hold on,
12.
12.
Yeah, he was a farm kid in, like, Central California, like Modesto, Stockton, like,
Huh.
all that area. He was born in Oakdale, and so when me and my brother were born, my dad said, "We're gonna plant somewhere, and my kids are never going to different like, they're gonna go to one group from start to finish." And so I grew up in Grass Valley, Bell Hill, Hennessy, Lyman Gilmore, Nevada Union, and so there will be people at my reunion that I went to kindergarten with, including
Wow.
my best friend since we've been best friends since we were 4. So and that's a long time to be best friends with somebody.
So how many high schools though did your dad go to?
I don't. It was a lot. I don't know. Yeah,
Because
they
12, he
moved
didn't go.
around.
You're talking about 12
No,
schools
not 12
throughout
high
his
schools. No,
youth. Yeah, yeah,
12
yeah.
schools throughout it, but 12 schools throughout your 12 years of school.
Sure. That's
Yeah.
whatever year.
No, so he never got to make friends, lifetime friends and stuff like that, uh, because of it, and that's not my situation, and I live, 20 minutes away from where I grew up, so, like, I'm still here, I still see people that I know from school, but yeah, I think it's cool, like, I don't fear the high school reunion, yeah, some people
Yeah.
do, so, alright, Sean, do you have any final thoughts?
Final thoughts. I'm going to live like I was dying out here in San Diego for the next 2 days before
Lay it all
starting the
out there,
grind
Sean.
that is the NBA season. So, not sure if anybody if this posts before I get out of San Diego, but if people have San Diego references, feel free to send them my way. Look
Sean's
forward
getting
to it.
himself in some more trouble, some more trouble.
No,
Let me
I'm
think.
well behaved.
Final thoughts for me. Thanks to everybody who showed up for the happy hour. We had quite a few people, like 70 plus most of the time. And like that's a lot of people to show up for like a Thursday night to sit on a Zoom call and drink and talk to people. So that was cool. Sean, we had Steve Cohen, city
Is
councilman
that?
Steve Cohen,
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. I remember. Yeah. Okay.
show up and actually talk on the podcast, which was he's a fan. Awesome. So shout out to Steve
Great.
Cohen, who is one of the few people who gave a thumbs up to a new arena in
That's
Sacramento,
awesome.
and was part of the groundbreaking people that finally said yes to something and helped keep the Sacramento Kings in Sacramento.
That was one
Uh,
of those names you threw out, and I'm like, I know that name. Who is that? I
yeah,
literally said it out loud.
he
Yeah.
actually had emailed like, "Hey, I haven't seen the link to the happy hour," and I responded back, not thinking that I knew the name. And then when he was on the happy hour, I'm like, "Oh," and he had his video on. I'm like, "Well, I know who that is. That's cool."
That's awesome.
So that was cool. Like number 2, number 3 in the list here. Uh, Jump on board with the insiders. I'm on every day from 10 to noon with Kyle Madsen. He's off this week. We're gonna have a bunch of guests all week. Hopefully, Sean will be able to make it to one of those days. But Joe Davidson's gonna swing by one day. Jerry Reynolds is gonna swing by one day. I think
What?
Jake Gaden is gonna swing by one day and help out as I get through the week. And Jesse will also be a huge part of what we're doing, who is our producer on everything there at ESPN. And we also, Pat Martin, shout out to Pat Martin, who had his last day on the Eagle and is hanging it up
Wow.
after 35 years as like the DJ of Sacramento.
That is a
between
name that has
yeah
been around a long, long, long time. Good for him.
Yeah, so between 98 Rock and the Eagle, he's been, which are both Odyssey stations, he's been around forever, and he hung them up. So the cool thing about the Insiders is we're going to get done on game night, and the next morning we'll be there to digest everything that happened the night before for like a 2-hour window. So make sure you're tuning in and hanging out with Kyle and I. And we're going to keep doing this thing at the Kings Beat. We're growing. We're doing all kinds of amazing things. Super excited to start writing a bunch more and have content that's just flowing nonstop. Brandon will be back for the pod. Today was just a weird day.
We didn't
where we
acknowledge his absence, did we?
We did at the beginning.
He posted a cool video. He went and checked out the Tom's Watch Bar, which is outside of Golden One Center, that I've been waiting for it to open.
Oh, of course you have.
Yeah, it's gonna be there very regularly. And I was I text him after because I was like, the video makes it look like it's kind of smaller than I thought it might be. And he said, no, I think it's okay. I think it's pretty big. And I go, compare it to Yard House, which is kind of Yard House is also in the Doco area for those that don't know. And Yard House is obviously quite sizable. And he says, yeah, I think it's pretty comparable. So I was like, okay, that's great. So
Sean, they have a bunch
to,
of rooms. They have a whole bunch
do
of
they?
rooms that you can rent or that you can have a meeting at and stuff. So
At
maybe,
Tom's? Okay.
yeah. So maybe Tom's Watch Bar is somewhere that we talk about doing a live happy hour. I think that
You
would be cool.
think?
Maybe we could do like a Tom's Watch Bar, like we're giving them free advertising right now, but a Tom's Watch Bar like happy hour, like on a road game or something, where Sean and I and Brendan sit there and hang out with everybody, and then we got to go do our Kings coverage. But yeah, possibilities, man, possibilities.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the next happy hour definitely has to be in person. This Zoom shit's getting old. I'm telling you, man. I mean, as fun as the happy hour is, I'm telling. That's not why I missed the happy hour. You know, nothing against Zoom, nothing against Deuce and
Yeah.
Noel. I was checking out Odessa, but yeah.
Yeah, we need to do it live.
I've been trying to do this in person stuff.
Say hello to the peoples. Yeah. So, all right. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the Kings Beat podcast. Make sure to jump on board to the Kings Beat. Go to thekingsbeat.com and become a premium subscriber so you get invitations to things like the happy hour. If you don't mind, if you're still watching, give us a thumbs up, a rating, review anywhere that you're watching or listening to your podcast. And this thing's about to start kicking off and rolling, and it's going to be wild, and we're going to be go for the next 6 months. So thanks for tuning in. And for Box 40, Sean Cunningham, I am James Hammy, Kings Insider for ESPN 1320 and the Kings Beat. See you next week.